You've probably been taught that if you can just become the version of yourself that gets everything right, you'll finally be able to relax and feel good about who you are. But maybe the goal isn't becoming your ideal self, but instead becoming so secure in who you are that you don't need anyone else to confirm it. Hello, my Willish friends. I'm excited to talk to you today about this trap that so many of us get sucked into. And I have something to confess. I spent years trying to become this walk on water best version of myself. And I didn't realize that it was actually just self protection. I so desperately wanted to become this idolized version that I was picturing in my head that no one could ever again criticize, abandon, or reject me, including myself. So let's talk about what that really looks like because let me tell you, when I was in the midst of it, I had no idea that that's what I was doing. And when I reflect back, the one thought that keeps drilling into my head is I had something, and it's honestly almost even embarrassing to admit out loud, but it feels like I wanted really badly to be cool. It's like my brain was caught in this weird social hierarchy that we all learned when we were growing up. And when you follow the same exact social ladder day in and day out from the time that you're 5 to the time that you're 18, maybe 22, it makes sense that our brains are wired to navigate the world like that. I wanted to be undeniably attractive to everyone men, women, strangers, close people to me. I wanted to be so attractive that it turn people's heads. I really had a thing about being calm, cool, and collected, like being this chill, low maintenance girl. I wanted to go cool places and do cool things with views and on a boat and at nice dinners wearing great outfits. And not because we want to do those things because they're cool to experience, but because that would mean something. I really had a thing for being like a club girl or being in the party scene. That the moment I went to college, I needed to make sure that I was in every scenario, that I was in a bar drinking or I was going to parties or I was involved with the people that lived that lifestyle. And even post college or anytime I've ever been single, I had it in my head that I had to look hot and I had to go to the club and that's what I was supposed to do. Otherwise, I would be not cool. I had it in my head that I needed a friend group that was super close, which put a lot of pressure on me whenever I was with friends to be more agreeable and funny and entertaining and really supportive and just being a lot of fun. And all of that was just stuff that was inside of my head, things that I was picturing, life I was picturing, versions of myself I was picturing. And it caused me to hyperanalyze myself to a point that I became incredibly critical of myself to make sure that I fell in line with the action that would align me with that image. I needed to nail down a certain style and always, no matter what, no matter where I was, whether I was going to Walmart or I was going to dinner, I needed to show up in those clothes. And I not only needed to show up in those clothes, but the clothes needed to look really good on me so that I could fit that attractive narrative. And I had to be incredibly fashionable. But that's not how I live. So that didn't always happen. And I would tear myself down. Or if it did happen, I would still be tearing myself down because I didn't look exactly like the image inside my head. I thought something looked weird. Like I didn't like how my stomach looked. Or I didn't like how I looked in a picture. Or I compared myself to other people's outfits and automatically meant that there was something wrong with mine. Something was always off. I had that obsession with being calm, cool, collected, unbothered, low maintenance, chill. And then I would show up and be hyper and excitable and stumbling over my words and rambling and saying things without thinking. And then I would completely tear myself down for that, either in the moment or afterwards, would sit there and ruminate about the things that I said. I really would beat myself up about that specifically, especially because I did have this piece of me that still wanted to be that fun and excitable. Like that was also part of it. Like I didn't want to just be stoic. I also want it to be like funny and entertaining, that everything that came out of my mouth was still funny and witty and admirable and cool, but I was still very much in control of myself. And anything that fell short of that was a one-way ticket to Spiral Town. I really felt like I had to have this super impressive career, that if I just climbed the corporate ladder or I got married, had kids, bought a house, that I would just be following into this sheep matrix like everybody else and that there wouldn't be anything special about me. I also had this really weird thing that I wanted a high body count. I thought that dating a lot of people or sleeping around with people, like doing this like fuck girl kind of mentality would bring me closer to that idolized version of myself, but I never wanted to do it. Like every time I would put myself in a near position to let that happen, it was just never my thing. I've always been a relationship girly, and I always would shit on myself for being that type of person that couldn't have these detached relationships. I always wanted to be around the coolest people in the coolest places. I wanted a perfect morning routine and a perfect night routine. And I wanted to go to the gym every single time regularly. And I wanted to eat clean, whole foods all day, every day. That was the only thing that I did. Absolutely never gave in to wanting to just rot in bed and eat Taco Bell. But guess what I was doing a lot of the time, which led to more self criticism. And any big emotion I had to be handled either in the way that society would want me to handle it or that would make other people comfortable. Because that would keep me in the cool, calm, collected category, even though I'm a highly sensitive person. That version sounds pretty great, right? I thought if I became that, I could finally feel good about myself. And self improvement media made me believe that it was possible if only I could work hard enough. If I could learn as much as I could and apply as much as I could and become aware as much as I could, then people could no longer make me feel like I wasn't cool enough or pretty enough to be desired by them. If I was just militant about making these things happen, I would become impossible to reject. And if I did everything right and people did still reject me, I would be the one in the right and they would be the one in the wrong from any third party point of view. And that person would regret doing that. I was trying to completely eliminate that messy, chaotic, type B, spontaneous, lazy, ugly, loves to just lay there and do nothing and be laid back and be in my safe, comfortable little bubble because I thought that made me unimpressive and undesirable and unlovable and not worthy of even my own approval. I imagined that this version of me that could get rid of all of those things would earn the approval of this imaginary crowd that I had inside of my head. I was trying to make sure that not being chosen would never happen again. The truth was, I was obsessing over becoming better because I was doing everything to not feel the shame that I deeply felt for not feeling chosen and desirable in situations throughout my life. I was afraid if I just was who I wouldn't be accepted by others. And even if I was accepted by others, I would be overlooked. And while my self improvement goal of becoming confident was a genuine desire, trying to become the most successful, impressive, emotionally healed version of me was just this empty promise that I was making to myself that if I became that, I couldn't get hurt again. And if only I had known that criticism and rejection and abandonment could never be completely prevented, I would have focused all my attention away from those checkpoints that met society's expectations and the qualities that are praised in the media and zeroed in on getting to know exactly who I was. That way, I would have an anchor to rely on when I had those crazy, chaotic, emotional feelings instead of relying on the unreliable perfection to fix me. In hindsight, I wasn't actually trying to become my best self. I was trying to construct a self that was so flawless that I would finally feel safe inside of my own life and inside of my own mind. The funny part is, even though I wanted all of those things, it was impossible for me to do any of them. I didn't do any of those even close to well. It's not like I was achieving these great things. I, a lot of the time, would just have the image in my head and not actually have the image out in real life. Maybe a little bit, but not anything crazy. So that left me completely confused because I was consuming all of this self improvement information and I was gaining all of this understanding and awareness about why I was the way that I was. But I still wasn't experiencing that satiating feeling I was chasing of relaxing into finally feeling enough. If doing all of the things to become better was supposed to finally make me feel safe and worthy and uncriticizable, why wasn't I reaping the benefits of all of the work I was doing? Every time I improved something about myself, that finish line would subconsciously move. I did not realize that was happening. I didn't even identify with that, but it was moving. I never ever acknowledged a win, ever. The only time I ever felt proud of myself was when I moved into my first Chicago apartment that had a view of the Sears Tower. It had these big windows, and I could see the Sears Tower from my bedroom window. And I think I felt proud of myself for that, or I know I felt proud of myself for that because that fit that cool image living in the city and having a cool view. But interestingly enough, even when I moved to North Carolina and Florida to accomplish my goal of doing something outside of the norm and not falling into the sheepish matrix that I had inside of my head, I didn't feel that satiating feeling then. Accomplishing things never made me feel secure. All it was a progression to the next level, and there was always a new conversation or date or friend hangout or work situation to handle. And most of the time, shocker, I didn't handle it exactly the way I wanted to in my head. So much of my confidence depended on evidence that I was doing well. And no matter how much evidence I collected, it never healed the fear that I had of being perceived or being rejected or not being enough. I had no relationship with myself. And even if I had a sliver of a relationship with myself, it was one of hatred and contempt because she would never do what I was bullying her and gaslighting her into believing she was capable of doing, which led to no self trust and there was no hope of confidence. And it just taught me that my natural personality and instincts and ideas and thoughts sucked. What's funny too is that even if I was acting more in alignment with the version of me that I wanted to be and someone still criticized or rejected me, it's not like I handled it in a cool, good, I'd roll off the shoulders kind of a way. No, I still crumbled because I thought that I had more work to do still. I always made it my responsibility, that it was always something that I could do better or I screwed up that caused the rift to happen. I never ever, ever, which is so bizarre, ever considered that maybe that person just has a different perspective, a different point of view. Maybe crazy, they're wrong. But it's not about someone being right or wrong. We could just have different opinions. So one day, it was completely random. It was just another ordinary moment. Someone gave me pushback on how I handled something. And for whatever reason, something came over me, something washed over me. And I had this thought of, if I could go back and do it differently, would I? And the answer was no. If I could go back and do the same exact situation over again, I would handle it the same exact way. And it was so freeing to realize that I showed up authentically and that I could be okay with that choice. That led me on a mission to get to know myself so deeply that the only approval that mattered was my own. And whatever anybody else thought wouldn't derail my opinion of myself. That started with building the habit of noticing every time my brain got weird. I had to recognize the signs that I was in my head. For me, it was when I felt frantic. My brain felt heavy. Sometimes it feels like it's hard to breathe. It causes this pressure on my throat and my upper chest. I would space out. I would pick my eyelashes and bite my nails more. I would be more disassociated. I would be ruminating and caught in these thought loops. And when my brain would get weird, it could be one of those things, it could be all of those things, it could be any combination of those things. But I had to build the habit of noticing when those things were happening and acknowledging that they were happening. Once I built the skill of recognizing when I was in that activated headspace, my goals shifted. I moved away from wanting to perfect and suppress any of those feelings ever happening at all, and instead tried to mitigate the amount of time I spent there. And through that practice, I discovered the true definition of resilience. It wasn't this bounce back, glow up era sort of thing that I feel like a lot of resilience has presented to us as, but it is how quickly you can get back to neutral clarity. So my mission expanded. I needed to get to know myself so deeply that I would have a place of neutral clarity to return to, a safe space within myself that I could not only validate myself, but believe what I was validating. And that space has grown over time. When I first started, it wasn't much. There wasn't much that I could believe as truth. Maybe it was just, you are safe right now in this moment, or you were okay. And as time has gone on and I've gotten to know myself better, that safe space has gotten bigger. And there's more that I believe in when I validate me, that I know about me. Every time I noticed mental weirdness, I would remember to ask that original question: would I do something differently? And to build the skill of spending the least amount of time in that mental weirdness as possible, I had to build the habit of remembering to ask myself that question more and more. Sometimes I spent weeks ruminating about something before I remembered to ask myself that question. And then after having ruminated about it for so long, I had to ask myself that question over and over and over and over again to finally feel satiated. And then sometimes it only took me a few days. I would be ruminating about something that bothered me, but then I would remember to ask that question within a couple days' time. And then it became hours. I would spend hours spiraling and remember to ask. But now it's minutes. Now I can get upset about something and I remember to ask myself that question right away. The issue I was running into, though, is sometimes the answer was yes. Would I have done something differently? The answer was yeah, I would have. Which obviously caused me to fall into the ruminating mental fog that was happening before until I incorporated these two things into my practice. The first thing is reminding myself that at that point, I did not have the information that I have right now, whether it was 2 months ago, a week ago, a couple days ago, 5 years ago. At that point, I didn't have the information that I have now. The 2 minutes ago thing really did wonders for me because if you do something and you recognize that it's not something that you want to do and you didn't like how that felt or you didn't behave that way, you know that now. You didn't know it 30 seconds ago, but you know it now. And now you can store that as information so that you can show up differently in similar situations in the future. And the second practice is minding the knowledge to skill gap, knowing that I can intellectually understand how to do something, and that does not mean that I have the skill to execute it. So, being able to give myself grace and patience so that I can build that skill over time. Something I still did really struggle with, though, is when people would perceive me in a way I didn't like, or criticize, or reject me, or misunderstand me. It wasn't just this perceived imaginary world that I was inflicting on myself from some people in the ether and what that would mean about me. It was actually directly happening in my face. For this, I followed a very similar practice. Sometimes I was able to still ask myself that original question: would I show up differently? But I incorporated something more for this. I felt that if I asked myself, who I was taking the criticism from. Do I want to live like them? Even if they were somebody that I loved and respected, maybe they have a different perspective than me. They navigate life through a different lens. And I really needed to consider who was doing the misperceiving, who was doing the misunderstanding, who was doing the criticizing. I would say about 80% of the time, it was not somebody that I really cared about what their opinion was of me, you know? Like it wasn't somebody that I was really striving to be anything like. But again, when it was people that I did love and I did really deeply care about their opinions, I know that they're coming at it from their lens and I'm approaching it from mine. I think the most important part, though, was what I was doing during those in between moments when I wasn't elevated emotionally or in that space of mental weirdness. Instead of being hyper fixated and bullying myself into doing all of these things that would fit into this ideal image, I just allowed myself to naturally gravitate towards whatever I wanted to gravitate to, noticing what I wanted to do and doing that instead of forcing myself to do things. And here's the part that surprised me. I actually did a lot of the things that I wanted to do, and I did them without this guilt or feeling bogged down by the pressure of trying to become this ideal version of me. There were pieces of me in those things that I genuinely wanted, that I genuinely valued. So it made sense that it was easy to do them. I was never crazy and damaged for wanting those things. I was crazy and damaged for the way that I was approaching it and what I thought having them or not having them meant about me. I was able to shift my perspective from this conglomerate bird's eye view of my entire life and thinking way too far into the future and bring it more short term and no longer judge my current self based on that future version of me that I was picturing. Still keeping that future person that I wanted to be, the things that I wanted to strive for in my mind, and keeping those things close to my heart, but I allowed myself to make them smaller and bring them into the short term so that I could eventually get to that long term version of me over time, but not judging who I am today based on who I want to be in the future. I started with asking myself what I could do to just make this hour better. And then eventually it turned into day and then week. And I pretty much, for the most part, keep it there. The farthest I'll go is a month, but I do this very casual monthly reflection where I set goals and then reflect on them the following month to see how far I got. Because again, I need to know that I'm progressing and show myself my wins so I don't fall into that deep rooted self criticism mentality. The situations that come up that would have sent the old version of me into self criticism and overthinking and fixing, proving, spiraling are still very much prevalent. Those reactions to things aren't gone. Life happens, situations happen, some much more traumatic, some just everyday stressors. But I do still self criticize and overthink and go into that fixing, proving mode. You're gonna react. You're gonna overthink. You're in spiral sometimes. You're human. That's normal. But I come back to clarity quicker than I ever have. And when things take a little bit longer to get back to clarity, I remind myself that I'm not in a clear headspace and I allow that time to calm my nervous system and make myself feel safe and know that that's not a time to make decisions or judgments about a situation or about myself. If decisions and judgments need to be made, they'll come up when I'm back in neutral clarity. I can fumble over my words and get drunk and embarrass myself, eat McDonald's for lunch, compare myself to somebody else, and know that I am okay. And there's nothing wrong with who I am or how I live. And when someone criticizes me or misunderstands me or doesn't like me or disagrees with me, which happens a lot more frequently now that I am being authentic to myself and not so agreeable to make everybody like me, I know that I can anchor down into myself and know myself so deeply that I can unconditionally have my own back. Even if I would have showed up differently, if I could do it again, having the compassion for myself to know that I was doing my best in that moment. And then trusting myself to learn from it and make better choices in the future and making myself feel safe enough that I can let it go. I'm not going to go as far as to say I welcome rejection and disappointment, but I will say that because of it, I've learned that I can survive rejection without also rejecting myself. Now I'm less interested in convincing people to approve of me or think I'm impressive or desirable or to validate me. I make decisions because I want them, not because they'll make me this ideal version that I think I should become. I've drastically mitigated how much I over explain or apologize or shrink or perform or try to manage someone else's perception of me. Now I'm more willing to let people know how type B I really am or how highly emotional and sensitive and uncomfortable I can really be. How many mistakes I often make and how many times I find myself being a little bit lazy. I allow myself to just exist in my life without relentlessly feeling like I have to grind for more to prove that I can feel good and I can like who I am now. And when there is something that I genuinely want to improve on, I approach it from this place of neutral clarity rather than frantic desperation of achieving that thing so that I can feel okay with who I am. I can want to change something about myself without making who I am now the enemy. It's really shifted my self talk from how do I fix this about myself to how can I take care of myself. And the funniest, coolest part is, I realized that I'm actually a lot more calm, cool, and collected than I was giving myself credit for. But of course, I wasn't calm, cool, and collected when I was frantically trying to be calm, cool, and collected. And not only am I that, but I'm also the funny, confident, entertaining character as well. And it's all because of my developing skill to set boundaries and make choices from my authentic self and allow my genuine thoughts and feelings to show up in conversations. Take risks and be a little spontaneous and vulnerable and express myself as this authentic true self instead of expressing myself as this version that I thought I had to be in order to gain approval from others and therefore approval from myself. Now I'm way more willing to disappoint people rather than abandon myself because I know that the way to get closest to my ultimate goal of feeling satiated and enough in who I am and about my life is to do what is best for me. And I really want to reiterate that I do still have those mentally weird moments. They have not completely gone away, but they do not have the power over me that they once did because I am learning to control my thoughts and my mind more than my mind controls me. And I do that by spending as much time in neutral clarity as possible. And when I get out of neutral clarity, being able to bring myself back to it as quickly as I can. I don't feel good enough now because I finally became my ideal self on paper, or even because I never let my overactive mind get the best of me. I feel good enough because I built such a binding relationship with me through getting to know myself on such a deep level. And because I know her so well now, I know she has always been my friend, even when she was trying relentlessly to help us and to protect us and to make us something better and to do all of this stuff. She had my best interest at heart. She was trying to do right by me, that I have no choice but to unconditionally support and love her. Now I do my best to regain my own trust by not rejecting me and not criticizing me and not abandoning me, by gaslighting me into believing that if I do more self improvement, I'll finally become worthy of my own approval. And because of that, I now know that I don't have to become my ideal self in order to be good enough. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here. If anything did resonate with you, which obviously it did since you're still here, make sure to share it with a friend, because if it resonated with you, it probably will resonate with somebody close to you as well. So share it with a friend who you wish saw their greatness as much as you do. It's also really helpful to rate, review, and like the show. It really does help get episodes out to more listeners like you and I who need to live a little bit more wellishly, and it lets me know what kind of content you guys like to hear. I hope you guys have an aligned, safe, feel good enough weekend, and I will talk to you on Monday. Bye.